All right, so if you're just joining us, we were starting with a poll this morning just to get a pulse a bit of the uncertainties that folks are facing today. Of course, we cannot capture everything. We really tried to target some of the key things that we've been hearing. So thank you for participating in that. We'll definitely build that into our presentation today. All right, so I think Sue Ann, you had said that Amy was going to do some introductions, and so we can go ahead and get started. Sheree, you can stop share. Great, thanks.
Thank you so much. Welcome everybody. So we have this is the beginning of our Innovation and Practice series for the winter for 2020. And we're looking in this series at what's beneath the masks. And so this is our kickoff event, and Dr. Placida Gallegos and Dr. Pamela Hopkins are going to be talking about many masks, many identities, vulnerability, bravery in uncertain times. And I'm particularly excited about this topic because I've been thinking a lot about, being remote and being part of a community, our work community, our family community, our where we live. We're all involved in all different kinds of communities. And in order to feel a part of a community and to be able to embrace a community, you need to be known and understood, and you need to understand and know the people around you. So I have a feeling that today is going to kind of take us a step forward in our own journey of being a member of a community. These two women, as I have come to get to know their backgrounds, are incredibly impressive. And I feel really lucky that you have both agreed to speak to us today and work with us around these issues. Dr. Placida Gallegos is an organization development consultant and executive coach, and she's been doing this for 30 years. And she's engaged in supporting individuals, groups, and organizations in achieving and thriving in optimal outcomes. And she's deeply committed to co-creating inclusive organizations and teams that support people to learn and grow in their fullest capacity. She's widely published, and she has 2 master's degrees and a PhD. So her background is in counseling and social and personal psychology. And I'm very, very excited to hear what she has to say today. And then Dr. Pamela Hopkins is one of our own. So she's a faculty member here at Golden Gate University. She teaches in our industrial, organizational, and psychology program. She's been working for over 25 years as a business leader, a leadership development practitioner, a strategic consultant, and an executive approach. And she brings an integrated approach to solving strategic issues facing her clients in today's complex workplace. Both of these women work in the area of diversity, inclusion, and leading lots of different groups of people and individuals in becoming their full selves and in their leadership capacity. And so I'm really excited for today's presentation. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here with us today.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks so much for the introduction.
And I'm Amy McClellan. I'm the Dean of the Business School at Golden Gate University. Thank you. Welcome, you everybody.
Yeah, and we do have a third partner. So Placida Gallegos, myself, Pamela Hopkins, and Sheree Salanga is with us today. Sheree is our really production team. She is even just one person, but she supports all of our efforts, especially as we have pivoted to the Zoom environment. So Sheree will be helping us create smooth transitions today in and out of our breakouts and conversations. So I am going to toss it over to Sheree for some Zoom reminders.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, just a few Zoom reminders. You will be muted to reduce background noise, but please do remember to unmute yourself when you have something to say. If possible, we ask that you please keep your cameras on, especially during breakouts, so that you're staying focused and engaged with your group. And then use the chat for questions and comments a few of us will be managing the chat, so we'll keep an eye out. And Pamela always says to practice, we're practicing flexibility and grace. So we do understand that there's a lot going on at home with kids and families and mail and pets and all of that. But as much as possible, we do ask that you keep your camera on. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheree. And thanks for the full team. We know we have a big team here at GGU supporting us today. So thanks so much. So Dr. Gallegos and I have been thinking about the many masks that we have to wear and juggle and manage our multiple identities certainly in times of uncertainty. And requiring us to tap in and find places of strength from our vulnerability, right? And what it takes for us to kind of lean into some of the discomfort and the uncertainty. So we've put together a series of elements today that we want to literally just be kind of thought partners with you on. We're going to offer some little nuggets of information that we've gathered on our journey. And as we continue to work with clients of all types around some of these topics, but we do see this as a conversation. So this is our agenda for today. Just going to set up very briefly some context. And one of the core elements that we'll be talking about today is loving fiercely with vulnerability. We think it's so essential in just again, in today's environment, that we can start talking less about divisiveness and more about togetherness and connectedness. So we will really use this metaphor of many masks. And as you know, literally many of us are wearing masks to stay safe, but we're also figuratively wearing masks. And we want to explore that dimension as well. We'll also talk about kind of finding our way, how you center yourself and what really matters, and managing these ongoing levels of threat. So it's just a reality, and we want to give you some ways to think about those resilience skills, probably that many of you are already deploying, and share with each other some of the coping strategies, the best coping strategies that you can walk away with. And then lastly, we're going to draw on some lessons for Buddhism today. And we think that again, is another really wonderful reminder about mindfulness and somatic work and how important that is in our coping, strategies. So lots of breakout discussions, several activities, and we're going to fill up your 90 minutes pretty quickly here. So with that, I want to look back at the poll. As we asked you what uncertainties you were really challenged by, it looks like the number one thing that was coming across was certainly about work changes. It looked like self-care and balancing work and personal life showed up as well. Of course, we had some around social justice and uprisings, food insecurity, and some around all of the above. There's so many other things. So in our context, we are handling and managing every day since sometime in February, early March, a global pandemic, and thinking about all the ways in which our lives have changed, expectations, how we work, how we live, how children are being schooled, right? The self-care element. So what is going on for us? Stress is at an all-time high. We know seeking out any kind of mental health support is also at an all-time high. Taking care of each other. So our families, many families are still separated. How can we take care of our family members in some of their greatest time of need? I'm actually on the East Coast and have been here for a month. Participating in caring for a terminally ill family member. And, very, very difficult in times of the pandemic for so few of us to be able to be here with our loved one. Gosh, I mean, Placida and Sheree and I are in sessions every day with folks who are managing their own workload and their child's school load, right? And now doing that in the home, in in very different situations, updating routers, dealing with the internet functionality, but then also just the challenges. And think about the kids who really struggle with this kind of learning, and not being able to really reinforce that kind of learning modality and differences. We know that, the housing crisis, people are being evicted, people cannot pay their rent. The sheer terror that must feel like. We know that people are, needing to find new ways to live and cope with these changes around housing instability. And how can we support folks? And then we also know the work changes. We know there are many organizations that are dealing with layoffs, many organizations that are dealing with significant impact to their P&L, their balance sheets, and just, again, trying to survive, especially small businesses, when we think about the impact that this crisis has had on small businesses. Food instability, probably many of you have participated or have seen, the amount of need out there around food support, food banks, very long lines. Right early in COVID, I've actually been participating in the Contra Costa food service, and we had 1,500 people line up in the first 10 minutes, 1,500 cars. It's just a tremendous need right now to support in any way we can. Certainly, we all know with George Floyd's murder in May, huge, massive uprising around the world, not just in the United States. And Black Lives Matter is not a new movement, but we felt this resurgence and this really call for organizations, individuals, those in power, right, to really confront and interrogate systemic racism and the injustice, right, especially on Black and brown bodies. So really powerful. And I just want to say, these are just a few things. I'm just highlighting, I cannot highlight everything. These are just a few things, and we know that there is more uncertainty ahead. We know that there are vaccines coming out. We know, right, that people, our healthcare workers, our frontline workers are working tirelessly to help keep us safe. And we're still going to have to, right, dig deep and figure out ways to cope. So with this, I just want to say, yes, we know you're holding a lot. There's a tremendous amount that people are holding. All right, so we're going to switch to Placida sharing a bit about how we're going to help. We need to help one another shift from really the sense of hate or divisiveness to what we're talking about today, which is how to love fiercely. Placida, are you having a sound issue? Let me see if I can unmute you. Try now.
I'm having more than a sound issue. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can't even see the screen. So I'm going to.
Well, we can hear you now.
Okay. All right. let me. Okay.
There's always some technical glitch on all of these. So Placida, we are on the pyramid of hate.
Okay. Let me. All right. Well, I'll solve my problem later. So yeah. So we started this really thinking about how much language there is around hate and how prominent hate is in our society, and how both commonplace and familiar and accepted hate is, and that there's just so much depending on to what extent you think about it, but certainly separation between people who are different, ignorance, fear of difference, prejudices and discrimination playing out in different ways, and certainly violence, either blatant acts of violence or the threat of violence, and the threat of being wiped out, which is everywhere in our world today. So we have this, sort of bland, ugly pyramid that just shows how we're inundated with messages about hate, and we really want to look at what's the alternative to that, and how do we even talk about beyond hate to connection. And so we created the next slide, which really is what our hope is and what we're trying to create in our organizations, that we want to make it more sort of normal to talk about love, and not a wimpy love. So we really talk about fierce love, and you'll hear us use that language throughout, that we want to really move toward making meaningful contact across difference, so that we're really not avoiding each other, but leaning in, listening to each other's stories, and becoming more aware of ourselves and other people. And really, and we're going to talk in a few minutes about the skills of deep listening and empathy, that we're not just yeah, right. And especially in the Zoom environment, where we have to, it's a different way of operating. We're like from the neck up, and so we forget that we're whole people with lives and pain and suffering. And then we talk about really, what does it mean to really stand next to people and walk with them in what is meaningful allyship, not just signaling virtue and saying, I'm an ally, but really, what does it mean to be with each other in a powerful way that involves disagreements and struggle and vulnerability, and really is a way of loving that doesn't just, let's pretend we're the same, let's pretend we are having the same experience, instead of saying, we are having very different experiences, but at the same time, we're all going through very difficult struggles, and no one is fine. Is one of my the Avett brothers have a song called "No One Is Fine," and I think we're all struggling, and so how do we struggle together? And one of our hopes from this time together today is, you at least that you're in good company as you struggle. There's no magic bullet, but really that we can at least accompany each other better as we move. Next slide. And so we love this, James Baldwin, who was so ahead of his time in so many ways. And, and he said, love takes off the mask that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. So our mask can trap us if we feel like we're stuck in just being one person. And so he says, I use the word love here, not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace. Not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. And so this is the kind of fierce love that we're talking about, that we show up with our vulnerability and our flaws and our mistakes, and how do we make the world safer to be human and to be fully human. And I think that's certainly what Baldwin was calling us to so many years ago. And so we like this notion of allophilia, which is a word that we hadn't heard much about before we read some of Patinsky's work, but it's the opposite of homophobia and the opposite of xenophobia. And it's like, instead of hating difference, what if we love difference? What if we come to recognize and appreciate that difference makes us so interesting, and our differences make us rich and complicated. And so instead of avoiding, ignoring, or pushing away the various ways that we're different, let's embrace them. Let's find ways to appreciate them. And so, as Brene Brown, one of our favorite people, says, she said, to love someone fiercely, these are risks that involve vulnerability and often pain. Recognizing and leaning into the discomfort of vulnerability. I open myself up and I'm not sure how I'll be received, and I'm not sure if you'll like me if you find out I'm not perfect. And so loving fiercely across difference is not neutral or negative, but engaged and authentic, interested in learning about the other person. And that it's very liberating, that I can be more of myself when you make yourself vulnerable, I make myself vulnerable, and then we get more. We grow exponentially by having a deeper, fiercer, broader love that really allows us to be vulnerable. And that's what we're leaning into. And so we'll share this brief clip from Brene Brown on the myth of vulnerability.
So I think the biggest myth about vulnerability is that it's weakness. I think a lot of people were raised to believe that. It was modeled, I think, certainly in our culture. We see that a lot, that to be vulnerable, to be open, to be exposed is to be weak. And the truth is, what I found in my research is that vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, I would argue that it's our greatest measure of courage. When we went out and asked people, what is vulnerability? We heard things like, vulnerability is the first date after my divorce. Vulnerability is starting my own company. Vulnerability is taking responsibility for something that went wrong at work. Vulnerability is sitting with my wife who has stage 3 breast cancer and making plans for our young kids. Vulnerability is taking my business public. the definition I use in my work of vulnerability is simply uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Vulnerability is about the willingness to show up and to be seen, even when there are no guarantees. And it's interesting to me. I mean, one of the things that I thought was really interesting, I gave a talk, it's probably a couple of years now, and it was being translated by people doing American Sign Language. And they came up before the talk started, and they said, are there any words that you're going to use a lot in your talk that we should know about that it might be different? And I said, well, I use the word vulnerability a lot. And they kind of, there were two of them, and they kind of looked at each other and they said, oh, we do this for vulnerability. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, it means weak in the knees. And I'm like, wow, that's not how I talk about vulnerability. And she said, well, there's only one other sign for vulnerability. And I said, what is it? And she said, and I said, oh, that's what I'm talking about. And so to me, vulnerability is our most accurate measure of courage. I mean, it's pretty powerful when I have 13,000 pieces of data collected over 12 years that I cannot find a single incident or story of courage that was not completely underpinned by vulnerability. I think the problem arises that there's so many little paradoxes with vulnerability, and one of them is that vulnerability is courage in you, but weakness in me. When I meet you, it's the first thing I look for in you, but it's the last thing I want to show you in me. And so I think to really put ourselves out there, knowing that if we do that enough, we're going to fail, I just don't think it gets more courageous than that.
Great. Excellent. So as we think about this notion of masks, and how we've had to kind of get friendly with masks in ways that we never did before. And so it certainly can feel oppressive and burdensome, but we wanted to kind of open up the possibility that there's both cost of wearing masks, but certainly a way that wearing masks is also a sign of love, right? And it's a way of, I want to protect other people. I want to protect my family, my loved ones. So in some ways it takes great courage, to wear the mask, and then think about what does a mask, sort of permit, what does it allow? And then what does it preclude? What does it prevent? And so we found this wonderful sort of series from MIT that they'd done a whole series on the meaning of masks and new ways to think about and practice masking, and thinking about, people have worn masks for all of humanity. There have been different ways that masks have been worn as part of theater, as part of beauty, artistic, religious beliefs. And so we're not the first people to engage around masks. And so there's a real potential here to think about what masks have I had to put on in order to survive in these really difficult times, and what roles have I had to take on that I didn't take on before. And Pamela and I used to work all the time face to face, and then suddenly we're in Zoom world every day, 24 hours a day. And so we've had to reshape everything about the way we work, about the way we learn and work with groups and people. And so we've developed a whole other sort of skill set and other tools, and with Cherise helper, and lots of Zooming and lots of breakout groups and lots of tools and apps. And so there's a real opportunity in this moment. And one of the things these folks from MIT were saying is that masks are widely used to create alternative realities. So it's a way of sort of changing up the world, and that you can actually, by seeing people's eyes, you're seeing much more of the person when you're not distracted by other parts of them. But also masks allow people to suspend their everyday identities and assume new ones. Alternative worlds provide experiential and experimental spaces in which societies explore issues and share insights in a safe, impersonated way. Hence, a mask often conceals one identity to reveal new possibilities. So that's really what we want to invite you to think about. What are you giving up? What have you lost? But also, what are the new possibilities in seeing yourself in this new environment? So we do a lot of work around social identities, which is kind of the groups that we're members of, and all of us are members of very different groups. And so it's very dynamic. And so a social identity can be something that you've chosen or something that you're born into. And so, is born into a particular family, a particular cultural group, a particular class group. And then I may, go to school, get those way too many degrees that I've gotten. And those are things that I've chosen and that have shaped my life and shaped the direction of my life. So they could be visible or invisible. Most of our identities, we don't, if I don't tell you, you don't know. And so it really involves a lot of communication, but they are always shifting. So even, as I age and as I move into my 60s, then, it's very different to be seeing the world at the tail end of your career versus the early side of your career. So no matter what it is, it's a constantly moving target. We're not just one thing, we're many things in each of us. And so we have multiple identities that depending on the situation are called out. So if I'm in a group of all white people and I'm the only person of color, then that's a very different thing than if I'm with a group of Latinos, or I'm with a group of women, or a group of parents, or whatever it might be. So our identities are multiple, and then different situations call forth different parts of ourselves. And society determines a lot about how our groups are seen and how our differences are valued or disvalued. And so we see that in our political environment, where it's like, what matters, what counts, who has power, whose voices matter more, whose voices matter less. All of that kind of gets put on us. It's not just how I see myself, but how people see me. And so certain identities are more salient or prominent in certain situations than others. And so it's not only who I am is changing, but the minute I step into a different room, the dynamics change, and there's a different calculus about who am I in this situation, who do I feel like I am from the inside out, and then what are people putting on me when they look at me, when they see me, when they engage with me. So very, very dynamic. So social identities, and invite you to think about what are all the different group memberships that you have that you're playing with, being a parent, being a worker, being, employed or unemployed, and how much that determines our worth. It's just like my value is directly related, and so we become human doings, not human beings, where we're always kind of working hard to prove our worth. And what's that about? That we feel like we don't just exist and deserve respect just because of who we are. So very complex dynamics. And so we want to have you play around with some of what we've triggered in our opening, and really have you think about, how has your identity shifted due to all the changes you've been going through this last year? What masks are you wearing figuratively to manage, and what's the cost of that? What is the cost of having to put on certain masks and take off certain masks, and play with this idea of who you are in the world? As the world has shifted and we're turned upside down, then where are you right now? And we want you to kind of locate yourself. So we're going to have you in some pairs for a few minutes to just play around with how has your identity shifted in the past few months. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, including those who got lost along the way. We're sorry for the confusion, but we would like to hear some comments to those of you who did have a conversation, what came out of those conversations. And just to tell you that we work in a very interactive way, so your participating both in the breakouts and in the large group is an important part of the learning. So who would like to share just a couple of insights from either what you said or what you heard from others? And just take yourself off mute and go ahead.
I think, hi, how is everyone? I have an allergic reaction, so I'd rather not show my face, but one of the conversations that I had with a wonderful person in this group is that we have to kind of, I think people don't realize with our line of work and how much we're expected to do during the pandemic, that we are also individuals. We are mothers, we are women, and we are humans, and we also have a life. Some of us may have a partner or may not, and we are daughters or perhaps or children. So I think they think that we are just that career, especially right now for COVID and what's accepted. So that was one of our types of conversation. And another one is, as the other person with whom I spoke and we are getting older. I'm no longer in my 20s or 30s, and I'm not, I'm getting into my mid 40s now. And so before I dealt with a lot of sexist remarks and they were shocking and it really affected me and I hated it. But the beauty of getting older is you don't get them as much, but at the same time now it's these ageist remarks or comments. Oh, June, where's the other one? You know, the super younger one? Someone work, and I'm like, you mean the one that's 30? Yeah, the one who's much younger. And I'm thinking, what? You know, so you kind of get these in my line of work, although it's, you know, not in the movie industry, not being a model, you're expected to have this certain look and you're expected to be extremely energetic and youthful. And it's sort of an ageist thing. So we define ourselves like we're still who we are, whoever that is. And at the same time, we have this maybe this look that people may be trying to put us in this box. And I also spoke with the person that, you know, nowadays you have people that are saying he, she, it, they, and more power to it. I'm trying to understand how one person can be a they, but the point is that I think in some ways it's a good thing that people are identifying themselves and not letting society identify them. And so because I'm in my mid 40s now, and maybe I have a couple of grays here and there, I'm still who I am. In fact, I'm the better portion of myself and seasoned, and that professional who has dedicated my life to this profession, among other things. And so we were just talking about forced identities, stereotypes, and just being free to, and then like not realize, people not realizing that we have a life, like you're that career and that's it, and you better have that duty. And then also just us kind of metamorphosizing and just kind of evolving and being who we were before, but also being something new of what we want, not what someone tells us we are. So
That's
that's one of some of the conversations that we had, or our, you know, etc.
There you go. That's great. Shows a lot can happen in a few minutes. Thanks, June. That was very rich. Yeah, others. And those of you, if you could put your camera on, it would be helpful to be able to see more of you.
I talked a lot about, you know, how my life has changed, but I'm not really aware that my masks have really changed. I'm still wearing the same mask I was wearing before the pandemic.
What were those, David?
Well, I think, you know, like with my mother, I play the role of the son. As a CPA, I'm very professional. As a massage practitioner, I could be more laid back. With friends, I have all my personal problems that I don't talk about with clients.
Yeah. So they're all kind of working. You've got the right masks working for you in different situations. And so the invitation would be, is there another part of me that's, you know, growing, blooming, a new part that's wanting to emerge, you know? So, but yeah, that's very good. Yeah. Thank you. One more and then we'll move ourselves. You may be sitting on the comment that's going to help. Jean, is that?
It's Jeannie, and I don't know so much if my mask has changed, but my role has changed. So then that has changed how I go about doing things. So I'm a recovery coach, and I always did one-on-one, face-to-face, and I can't do that today. I work for a county agency, so it's hard to engage people when you are doing what we're doing here. You know, they don't either want to be on a camera, or they don't, you know, or they just don't. It's just harder to get into, I don't know, when I say a soul conversation and stuff like this. And then Ken, who I was in the breakout room with, you know, we both actually have some dealings, like, so everything is now online. So like, you know, supporting the women in a court system, I can't do that anymore. I used to go in with child protection women, you know, women in child protection and be their support. I didn't, and you know, you can't do that anymore. And you can't even be in the same room if you do an online with them at the same time. So the role has changed there. And then that also has depleted the hours that I can work, because I used to travel more, from place to place. And then my boss has moved me into, so I can take my recovery into a different aspect. I now have done case investigation for the Minnesota Department of Health. So I can take all my empathy and all the compassion stuff into doing the investigation. So I can still carry some of my, I don't know, talents into that. It's just shifted how I do my job right now. So.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks, Jeannie. That's a great example, because it really is there are a lot of things we can't do, but what are the things we now can do? Yeah. For example, we were always getting on airplanes and flying all over, and now just go downstairs and turn on the computer, and we can reach people all over the world in a moment that we couldn't before, so there are a lot of new possibilities, but we have to really transform ourselves, use those same talents and those gifts, but then how do I bring them forward in a new way? And the other point I wanted to make in relation to June's comment was, how do we detach ourselves from other people's approval? So I'm not a prisoner of either your praise or your criticism, because I feel good about who I am. I know who I am, and it's nice if you like that, and it's too bad if you don't, but I think, how do we ground ourselves in who we are? And so our relationship with ourselves has to be really solid to get us through these times. So that was really, really helpful. Okay, well, thank you so much. And we're going to move on, and we'll have you in some further groups in a few minutes. So we're part of what we found is working with adult learners is you have to keep it moving. People have very short attention spans. So in our work, we provide some scaffolding, and then we let you get at it. So Pamela.
Yeah. So we want to add a little bit more to your kind of basket today, I guess, or your toolkit to keep thinking about all of these different masks and our identities, but also just how are you managing? How are you coping? So we think this is really important. And one of the pieces that we're going to talk about is finding your way. So I want to start with just making sure that you identify what really matters most. Often what we hear people talk about is the head, the heart, and the hands, kind of that combination, like, what are you thinking? What's going on cognitively, right? What are you feeling? What are the emotions and that emotional or subjective essence that is going on for you deep in your heart? And then your hands, what are some of the things that you can engage in doing, right? What are some of the practices? What are some of the skills? So just identifying for yourself, that balance across head, heart, hands. We also know that prioritizing frequent communication, even when things are not certain, is very important, right? A level of transparency, a level of continuous kind of communication really is very helpful right now. Also connection, as Placida just said, we're meeting in these little boxes, basically professionally and personally. So how do we make sure that we are reaching out to those that fill us up, right? And deepening those connections. And then we also
Pamela, I think you froze. Or I did. Must be me. Is it me?
Oh no.
No, it's her.
Okay.
It's her.
Okay, Pam.
also wanted to offer actually taking your empathy.
Pamela, you had frozen up.
Oh.
And so we were without you for a moment there. So you moment.
Uh-oh.
But you're back.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. So I wanted to shift from into a couple of tools for you all to think about around applied empathy and deep listening, and really invite you to just turn both of these up. I think about it as like the flame on our stove, right? Just kind of turning it up, turn up my attention so that I shift from cognitive empathy to emotional empathy to empathic concern, which actually means that I'm moving my empathy into addressing other people's needs, right? So that's one way. The other way is also then using my empathy to deeply listen to you. I want to hear about your experiences. I want to go beyond content into your emotions and into what's most important to you, your purpose, your intentions, your values, right? And then of course, all the while, as I'm managing these stress levels, I do have to think about my own emotional regulation. I have to notice what's going on in my body. I have to name it, right? I have to breathe. We really recommend breathing. It's a very good practice, and good to remind yourself, like, am I breathing from my collarbone? That's always a clue for me. Like, if I'm breathing from my collarbone, it actually means I'm not very grounded, right? And how can I pause? How can I slow down? How can I ask more questions? So these are just some things that we wanted to add to your toolkit. And then we're actually going to add another dimension, which is the levels of threat that people are experiencing right now. And this is from the Neuro Leadership Institute, Leading in a Crisis. And so there are 3 levels that most of us are very aware of, actually in kind of maneuvering and holding. One is alert, one is hyper aware, and the third is alarm. So the alert level means we're just scanning for threat. We are aware, right, of what's going on around us. We're paying attention. But when we shift to hyper aware, we actually feel possible threat, right? We actually start to get ready to react. Our bodies may have some reactions: dry mouth, sweaty palms, right? Flushed face, all kinds of bioreactions that can occur. But if we get to that alarm level, we actually get to panic. There's a higher degree of anxiety. We know this: fight, flight, freeze, right? We kind of go into that survival mode, okay? So there are lots of resilience skills to use, and we've been hearing from a lot of organizations and individuals inside them. One of the things in the alert phase is structure, actually having some organization, doing some planning, right? Thinking about your day, thinking about different conversations you're going to have. Minding your media, right? Shifting screen time, because we are on these things, 24/7. I know myself, I've identified at least one day every week where I do not look at a screen. So just managing that, getting yourself away from this. Again, what connections can you have? We know people are having social distant walks, right, with friends, where you're literally walking on either side of the road, but you're actually seeing people. So how do you connect with people? And we know movement is critical. Walking, hiking, right? Exercising in your garage, anything that you can do to move. A lot of people are doing yoga by Adrienne. She's really popular. When you get into the hyper aware, we know that there's some resilience skills here. One of the things is just to notice the cues in your body. What is going on somatically? So just do a body scan and literally check in. Like, where am I holding tension? Seeking out support. So therapists, counselors, right? Mentors, again, those trusted advisors. And then sleep hygiene. What kind of rest do you need, right? What kind of self-care practices? Can you take a warm bath? Are there certain things, certain types of, calming oils or candles, relaxing music, meditation, all those things. What can you do to yourself for yourself?
Yeah, so the goal is to, listen to yourself. So each of us moves through these phases and has different strategies. We have different relationship to stress, and so I have to get to know what are my resilience skills. What helps me when I'm, really in the alarm? How do I de-escalate my threat and really manage it? So we could all be exposed to the same level of threat, but we have different responses. Next, what's the bottom there, Sheree? And so, reading your own cues and, again, back to really listening to yourself as much as you attend to others, but to really stay at that alert level. So it makes sense to, what's going on, assessing what do I need to pay attention to right now, but not adding on layers of hyper vigilance, which is, those of you in recovery know, it's sort of a sense of constant threat, and we're not under constant threat. So that self-awareness and really enables strategic creative thinking. So we have to bring our best thinking and our best creativity to managing our own, resilience skills. So we're going to have you join in some small groups of 4, I think, Sheree, this time. And we are going to ask you to think about your own resilience skills and what are you practicing? What are you doing? And what are you succeeding at? And again, maybe something that you're doing is really going to be helpful to other people. So what are you doing? What resilience skills are you practicing? What's working for you? What threat level are you experiencing? And then what coping strategies have you adopted to keep your threat levels in check? And so we'll give you 10 minutes in those small groups to share some of those strategies. And Sheree will put that in the chat box in terms of the instructions, and then we'll hear back and come back and hear what some of those strategies are that have been working. And again, we're very creative about how we're managing through this. So how do we support each other in our work?
Welcome back, everybody. Sorry I got kicked out. Perfect timing, right? To be talking about resiliency skills. Can't control everything with technology these days, so just got kicked out and got back in. We would love to hear and have you share your best coping strategies in the chat box.
They're already doing it, Pamela. They're very
Awesome.
quick.
Awesome, you're very quick. And we've done so many of these sessions where people literally have acquired new coping strategies and ideas from one another. So it's a wonderful opportunity to learn from your community today. And we'll definitely, we'll share these slides as well as what comes up in the chat function for you. We'll make sure that Sue Ann and her team have that material.
Great, good.
Lots of great ideas. Wow.
I mean, I think nature is such a good one, right? Just being in nature is so healing. Just getting out for air, and the sky last night was amazing. Watching the planets converge, running, friends, pizza and beer.
Meditating, long walks. I mean, these are all great.
And there's such good tools, Insight Minder, is a great tool, and Calm is another one. There's so many, but it's just a matter of even 10 minutes a day, really helps to ground you, or writing, in a journal daily is really helpful. So great. All right. Well, we're heading into the last stretch here, and we want to, sort of draw from Buddhism in terms of, practices, some practices that we find very helpful in supporting us. And, a lot of people like Reverend Angel are doing a lot of work around what's the intersection of social justice and Buddhism, and how do we, kind of bring lenses into our world that pull together some of our different, how do we remain mindful and be activists for change at the same time. So we wanted to share a couple of lessons from Buddhism. This author that really talks about the Black and Buddhist, what Buddhism can teach us about race, resilience, transformation, and freedom. And the authors talk about, and it's an edited compilation, but the three really characteristics of existence are impermanence, impersonality, and imperfection. And that just to accept that this is life, and that no matter who you are, it's constant change. And so that's one thing that we can count on, is the fact that life will change, and that all phenomena arise and pass away. So the good things happen and go away, the bad things happen and go away. And so if we have that sense of the constant movement of change, and get friendly with that, get friendly with the fact that nothing stands the same, even for a moment. This moment passes and the next moment comes, and it's constant change. And so knowing that that's true is in some ways comforting, that it's part of our human experience, and that it's impersonal. It feels very personal when things are happening, bad things especially are happening to us. We feel like it's only happening to me, and we kind of get into tunnel vision, and we need to sort of open ourselves up. And, there's a practice called metta that says every suffering that I'm going through, other people in the world are going through that same suffering. So how do I use my suffering to share with others? And so, there is no sense of a self that's a permanent self that is unchanging. And so I have to recognize that I'm really a flow. I'm really in constant movement. And so to the extent that I can open myself up to that fluidity, then I can hold myself a little less carefully, and sort of not be so focused on myself, but myself as a member of the planet and of humanity. And imperfection, which is the one that we see so often in all of our organizational work, that, you know, people just are just driven to try to get things perfect, and it's such a trap. And instead, the Buddhists tell us that the nature of life is unreliability, ungovernability, and dissatisfaction, or simply put, shit happens, right? So that's just life. Like, nobody gets through life without having difficult things happen. So that difficulty, and they make the distinction between pain and suffering. So pain is mandatory. Nobody gets through life without pain. Living has pain in it. Dying has pain in it. But suffering is the stuff we add. So we add extra baggage to it, you know, so we take our pain and then we make it worse by the stories that we tell ourselves. And so when we can accept that pain is part of life, and we get easier about holding it, and we're not trying to force life to fit into what we want, because it's a setup for failure. So no matter how wonderful your life is or how bad your life is, it's in constant motion. And so we really like the fluidity that Buddhism is encouraging us to consider. And so we love this, you know, Pema Chodron, again, a great writer that she's written many things, but the places that scare you. And she encourages us to go into the things that scare you, and go toward the things you're avoiding. And so she says, you know, we're certain about who we are and who others are, and it blinds us. If another version of reality comes knocking on our door, our fixed ideas keep us from accepting it. How are we going to spend this brief lifetime? Are we going to strengthen our well-perfected ability to struggle against uncertainty, or are we going to train in letting go? Are we going to hold on stubbornly to I'm like this and you're like that, or are we going to move beyond that narrow mind? Could we start to train as a warrior, aspiring to reconnect with the natural flexibility of our being and to help others do the same? If we start to move in this direction, limitless possibilities will begin to open up. You know, so how do we release ourselves from the encumbrances of, you know, I'm always like this, I always do that, I'm this kind of person, you know, and some of what we talked about earlier. Can I try on this is an opportunity to try on different parts of myself and loosen up the way that I'm holding myself as a certain kind of person with a certain personality and a certain career. And as others said earlier, that I am my job, I am my work, I am my career, and just begin to, you know, sort of move away from those very narrow ways of thinking about ourselves. And so some of what we're calling fierce love practices, and then we want to leave you with this piece in terms of some of what you can do and what are some of the things that we encourage. So self-exploration, you know, and really aware of yourself, listening to yourself, really, and that's where I find journaling really helpful. It's a way of me listening to me and paying attention to what's going on with me, empathizing with myself, which allows me to empathize with other people, and learning to love the questions, you know, not always having to have the answers, but wow, I'm curious about this, I'm curious about that. And, you know, there's a way in which we can just be in the space of the questions and appreciating the questions that we're living through. And sit with uncertainty, you know, accept that uncertainty is part of our experience, and accept that challenge, accept the struggle that's involved. And it's messy, you know, it's very messy, because day to day, the uncertainty shows up in different ways, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We can't know what's coming. And so we lean into the discomfort, we release that perfectionism and catch ourselves saying, oh, and then release it. Just let it go and embrace imperfection, embrace the imperfection of life. And then explore the struggle, you know, befriend your inner child. You know, it's trite, but it's true. You know, all of us have our little wounded child inside of us that we need to embrace, that we need to comfort, to recognize what were some of the sort of baggage that you picked up growing up, because inevitably we do pick up baggage, and know what triggers you, and then recognize the support that's all around you and the resources that are all around you. Because I often have people like, we don't take in the good stuff, we're just scanning, you know, and it's that hyper vigilance kind of thing, that we're only looking for what's wrong or what's bad, and somebody says you're wonderful, or you did a good job, or that thank you, and we miss that, you know, so we don't take in, you know. When I do my coaching, I tell people, do you realize how wonderful you are? And people are like, no, I don't want to think about that. So taking in the compliments and the good things when they happen, and the people that love us, that are around us, open to helping us. Expect non-closure. We never really kind of get to the finish line, or things don't get tied up in neat little bows like they won't today, right? Every day is just kind of certain things get closed and other things are left unfinished. And that's okay, because we're on this journey, and it goes all the way through till we die, and then it's going to continue in some other form. Trust the universe in whatever form that looks like for you, whatever your practice is, and trust yourself. You know, and those are kind of the fundamental roots of really being able to love fiercely, and that's our hope for you. And so we want to highly recommend this book, My Grandmother's Hands, if you haven't seen it. And it's not the kind of book you can just read, because Resmaa is the kind of a person where there's a lot of practice in here, a lot of activities, a lot of questions, but we highly recommend his book in terms of helping us move through these difficult times. And so there's a practice in there that we want you to play with us now collectively. And we're going to play some music. And in that music, what we're inviting you each to do is take yourself off mute and ask you to hum along, And because one of the things Resmaa talks about is the physiological experience of humming and then humming together. And so let's hum along to this song, and feel free to move yourself, and we'll take ourselves off of, we'll be in gallery view. And just for a few minutes, let's be together and humming to the music that is coming. Pay attention to what goes on in your body as you practice this together. Take yourself off mute, please. This is something we actually want. I hear your humming. I want to hear some humming. So let yourself hum. Just imagine what could happen. Great.
All right. We're going to guess that you probably haven't been in many sessions where you've hummed collectively. So hopefully that was a new practice for you. So we would love to hear just some thoughts, like how will you love more fiercely in 2021? You know, we're coming to the end of this year. We've offered some tools and some ways of thinking maybe, and added some things to your toolkit. So we want to just open it up and ask an open question about how you'll love more fiercely in 2021. We certainly know that we need that in our world. So anybody who wants to share?
Like good teachers, we can call on people, right, Pam? Ainsley, go ahead.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to remember what's on that list of things that says love more fiercely. That would help me, because I don't remember. I can't write fast enough to grab everything, you know, while I'm looking at it. So I don't remember what's on that list.
Okay. Ask and you shall receive. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Yeah. Well, I am a lover of questions. I got that one covered. But Yeah, and actually what I teach has a lot to do with uncertainty. I teach an agile class, and that's all about uncertainty. So I've been steeped in that now since the late 70s when I first started learning about it.
Right. Yeah.
So it's yeah. I've never enjoyed uncertainty, but I've certainly learned to live with it well. Yeah. So befriending my inner child might be something I really have to work on a little more. That was a very unhappy person. So
yeah. Thank
very
you.
unhappy.
Good.
Thank you.
Angry.
She probably had a lot to be angry about. So let's.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Good. Thank
Yeah.
you. Mhm.
Thanks for sharing and being vulnerable.
Sure.
And somebody wants the slide deck, Pamela.
Yep, we will share the slide deck, and I think Sue Ann probably can say more about the recording. I don't know how the recording will get distributed.
Well, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Pamela and Placida and Cherie and Dean Amy McClellan. We will be posting the recording sometime in the new year on GGU Present. We'll send out a notification to you since we have all your email addresses of where you can view this again. We have 3 more workshops coming up between today and tomorrow. An hour of understanding stress and ways yoga can relieve it at 1 o'clock. Meditation, improv, stress relief as play at 4 o'clock. And then tomorrow, envision your next phase with Dan Klerman tomorrow at 11 o'clock. So thank you again. We'll be in touch with you. We want to make sure that this is an active community and that we can share what we've learned with you and you can share what you've learned with us. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Be well. Take
Thank
yourself
you.
off mute and say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Take care. Stay healthy.